With another video. This video is going to be looking at Manchester City versus Everton in the FA Cup quarterfinals. It's going to be made using Keyframe. So before I start, please like and subscribe to the channel. It's greatly appreciated as always. And the link for Keyframe is the software I'm using to analyze will be in the description below. So let's get right into it. Everton defended Manchester City in each of the three thirds, very organized in their 5-3-2. And this was tasked with controlling the central three corridors with their back five, mainly their three central defenders and their three central midfielders. So from here, Manchester City looked to counter this with some rotational work, moving through the three thirds of the field, but starting with Ederson in the build-up, splitting the two center backs, creating a little bit of asymmetry to change the reference points for Dominic Calvert-Lewin and Richarlison, and using Fernandinho as the lone pivot. And from here, he was able to create advantages via blindside movements of the forwards and affecting their play to either narrow them to give more space to the center backs or to take advantage of their connections when they were drawn wider by the two wide center backs. The fullbacks stayed a few yards more narrow than the full width of the field, while the interior midfielders pinned the Everton midfielders to give the first line of build-up more space to then break lines and progress through. So here, one example of a blindside movement Fernandinho could use when the ball would go into the half space. Fernandinho could take advantage of Calvert-Lewin and the commit he had to pressing in this situation. When the central defender of Manchester City would receive the ball, Calvert-Lewin would go and press using his cover shadow, which created the opportunity for Fernandinho to then go move in the blind side and create a positive passing lane using the platform and taking advantage of the pinning that we see going on between Allen and Andre Gomes and Bernardo Silva and Gundogan. When the ball was circulated and played into the wide areas, this was Everton's opportunity to isolate possession and try and win the ball higher up the field, because with a lack of structured possession in the game, Everton relied on transition moments and opportunities to break quickly and use verticality to go towards goal, but they mainly had a reserved press, meaning they didn't commit very many players into a very intense press in the fear that they might be overextended and leave space in more dangerous areas for Manchester City. Kyle Walker stays a few yards more narrow than the full width of the field to create a better passing option to a wide winger if they were to occupy this space, and we start to see Manchester City using the mutual help space, which can more or less be defined by the passing options in the first line. So if we look at it, the green represents a positive, strong connection between two players, meaning a passing lane is open, and we can use red to determine the passing lanes in the first line that are not open. So you may see this in other videos, but just when we're looking at the mutual help space or the first line connections, the red signifies blocked off passing angles by the press, and now the open passing angle into the wide player, which then Everton will try and exploit to then isolate possession and win the ball higher up the field. So, as we said, Everton didn't commit players to an intense press in a situation that could lead to them being broken and to a more dangerous position further up the field for Manchester City. So what this meant was they maintained more players behind the ball than a normal, typical intense press would, and they were more willing to drop into a low block or a mid block from their initial press because of fears of being overextended and the ability for Manchester City to use horizontal progression to then just walk the ball into the midfield third via their weak side central defender, as we see here. So with their central defender dribbling to progress the ball into the midfield third, the same concept applies for Fernandinho and his blindside movements when Calvert-Lewin goes to press the ball. This creates the opportunity for Fernandinho to then move into the half space and receive a simple 10-yard pass, vertical pass in the platform area. But now we start to see the structure of the midfield shaping up with Sigurdsson coming into the picture now. And now we see almost the opportunity for a central pressing trap triggered by Calvert-Lewin changing his orientation to the ball, and Everton maintaining very tight horizontal connections in the midfield, all creating access to the center. But this pressing trap wasn't very intense, again with the fears of being overextended. But with this, there was strong use of vertical partnerships in the half space between wide central midfielders and wide center backs. Then we saw Manchester City players affecting the midfield line by playing between them to narrow them, or to play wider, as we see here, to separate the connections and open up these interior spaces and diagonal passes into the half spaces. So from here, when Fernandinho did get on the ball, using his blindside movements, we see the structure of the midfield and the relationship in the wide area. Sterling coming narrow as the false 9 position, with Zinchenko occupying the width, moving higher up the field. So from here, what this would do was the two wide midfielders for Manchester City, Bernardo Silva and Gundogan, would play wider than the width of the midfielders of Everton, as we see here. And with the central pressing trap initiated, we had Allen jump to create access on the ball, and this created space for Sterling, but also the space was created by the players with their positioning in the half space to pull apart the connections to then open up this space for the 10. And it's quite clever to use this space in a system playing against a 3 center back defense, because this most central defender won't have the most tendency to jump because of the space that's conceded when the most central defender does jump. So Sterling can often find the ball with a bit of space to then turn and run at the back 5. So from here, we then move into the phase of Manchester City attacking Everton's low block, and we clearly see all 11 players here now with the 5-3-2, and we start to see the spaces prioritized by Everton and how the defense and midfield work together to cut off the advanced area options. So between the lines, we have our two midfielders, two attacking midfielders, through Bernardo Silva and Gundogan, but then Sterling playing between the lines as almost like a 10, with Zinchenko then occupying the width, and Phil Foden occupying the width on this side. So from here, these players would be changing the vertical line they're playing on, thus going from the midfield to then the defense's responsibility, and with Gabriel Jesus, with his tendency to drift one side to pin a wide central defender. For here, it's the left center back of Everton he's pinning. So now, this gives more opportunity for the midfielders of Manchester City to play between the midfielders of Everton and affect their movement. So from one side, we have our two wide center backs occupied, and our 2 attacking midfielders then occupying the 3 Everton midfielders. So with Kyle Walker on the ball, he could then potentially progress the ball and draw one of these players out and create a vertical 2v1 going forward, and then advance the ball or recirculate possession and look for more clear-cut spaces when moving forward. Another picture with all 11 players, we have our full back 3 and our single pivot Fernandinho, creating a rest defense of 4 players with our 2 wide central defenders playing in the half space, creating a 3 versus 2 with Everton's 2 forwards, with cover in behind via Manchester City's most central defender. And now we highlight the 2 center forwards, and now our 3 midfielders for Everton with our back 5. Again, the 2 wide central defenders are pinned, and our 2 attacking midfielders are playing wider in the half spaces, looking to separate the connections of the midfield 3, while the width is maintained through Zinchenko and Foden, and potentially creating 2v1 situations with these players and the wing backs. Because with these players being then connected by Kyle Walker, if we look at the mutual help space again, we can see Bernardo Silva's blocked off, but we have the green light for Phil Foden, and in this wide structure to then advance the ball and get in behind the midfield line through the wide area, creating then a 2v1 to enter the final third. So the next situation we need to look at is the tendency for Zinchenko to come in off the weak side and come in as a double pivot alongside Fernandinho. Mainly, this was more of a situational thing. Didn't happen frequently throughout the match, but it did happen enough to just mention it slightly that the potential was there. But when he was there, the left center back would stay at home and wouldn't jump to then change their rest defense structure and give them more of a presence in the middle of the field and tighter connections between the first and second line. But so now, in the second half, it was much of the same for Manchester City, with Laporte moving through the left center back position with his left foot. Then Everton still sticking to their 5-3-2, no changes, and Everton being affected by the 2 attacking midfielders of Manchester City, with then Gabriel Jesus pinning whichever side of the defense he then chose. Sometimes it was the weak side, sometimes it was the strong side, depending on the situation. Usually, when Manchester City would progress further up the field, he would stray towards the weak side to put him in a more advantageous to then finish any low crosses that might come in. But also, Manchester City being very clever about their positioning of their midfielders. Gundogan, as we see, he's much more narrow here, thus narrowing the midfielders and creating the opportunity for Laporte to then just progress the ball via dribbling potentially, rather than running into pressure of the Everton midfielders. So with Laporte breaking lines via dribbling, we have then the mutual help space situation and the decision making he has to make. So with the first possibility, we have third line pass is green, second line pass is red, and then the first line recirculate the ball is also green. So with the third line pass being green, we have to have a good supporting structure underneath, which is in the form of Gundogan, to then create the third line movement, and with the player being positioned on the wide center back, he'll jump, so there is space in behind for the player who will receive the third line pass to then access, and then with Everton overshifting to correct this defensive weakness, there'll then be more space in the frame of goal when entering the Everton penalty area. So the last picture here, again attacking the low block, trying to move through the thirds over the course of the video. We have our 3-1 build-up shape with a single pivot affecting the two center strikers from Everton, narrowing their positioning, and then opening up the half spaces for Manchester City to then dribble and progress through, whether it be Laporte or Kyle Walker. And then from here, creating the wide structures and using the mutual help-based decision making to then create 2v1s and positional superiority against the Everton 5-3-2, and using the changing positions and changing width of Gundogan and now Phil Foden when Riyad Mahrez came on to then affect the Everton defense enough to concede space in more dangerous areas. So that was just a quick video looking at the build-up of Manchester City against Everton in the FA Cup, because they had two very clearly defined structures, and just wanted to talk about it quick, introduce mutual help space into the analysis to get a feel of how it may be used. And I hope you liked the video, so please like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.